All right, guys, we are back. This is MMA Past, Present, and Future on the Sherdog YouTube page in partnership with Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. We've had absolute loaded lineups in the past, and we just keep rolling with an absolute loaded lineup. In the third segment, we have Ben Ellis, who fights on this weekend's Cage Warriors card. He's undefeated. In the second segment, we have Adrian Yanez coming off an incredible UFC debut. He's trying to make it 2 in a row as he fights this weekend. But I'm going to get to our first guest right now. He's already on the screen. We've had the first ever UFC lightweight champion ever. That was Jens Pulver. Now we have the second UFC lightweight champion ever. He is, of course, the Muscle Shock, Sean Sherk. Sean, how you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
Excellent. So I see the background. We just talked off air. You have this unbelievable gym right in your house. I mean, is this going to start turning into like the Hitman? Like remember the Heart Foundation where all the people would be training in the basement? Is that what we got going on here?
Well, it all started with my boys. They're both they both wrestle and they both box. So that's how this all started. Was I just wanted a place for them to train and some place where I could go train with them at home. Something real simple. We could just play around and learn at the same time. And then it kind of progressed from there. I've had people come out here and train with me on multiple occasions, especially during the lockdowns. It's been real convenient for myself and a few other people to come here and train, and it's real nice for my boys too, because they're both high school varsity wrestlers. So we're down here several times a week doing multiple different stuff, from sharpening up the tools to losing weight.
Sure.
The whole 9 yards.
Let me ask you this: how does the boss feel about that? When I say the boss, I mean the wife. How does she feel about having the gym downstairs?
Oh, it's great. I've got a good sized basement, so it doesn't take away from any of the other space. And that's what this space was utilized for when I bought the house in the first place. This was supposed to be the gym, so it's no surprises.
Now, did you have to build her something to kind of make up for it?
We have a living room down here and a few other dining room and a tanning room, so everybody's happy.
Sean, you broke up. What'd you say?
I said we have a game room for the kids too, with foosball tables and ping pong tables and all kinds of different stuff like that. So a little bit of something for everybody.
Nice. One thing I think about when I think about Sean Sherk and I think about the house is I love the story you used to always tell, that when you got your house, you had the fireplace, the mantle, and you left it empty until you got a UFC title. Is that still the only thing on the mantle?
It's empty again. So I moved since then. I live in a different house. So the house I live in now, again, I've got a fireplace with a mantle, and I took the belt down when I lost it, and it never went back up again. So that was kind of my thought process. Wow. I was going to face empty until I won the world title. When I won the world title, the belt went up there, and when I lost it, it came down, and it's been down ever since. And I've had several people over the years try to talk me into putting it back up there, but it's like, it just doesn't feel right. So
okay, where do you keep it now?
In a hidden, safe spot so nobody can find it.
Yeah, good. They're very smart to not say that.
Yeah, right.
So let's say it's been a decade since we've seen you in action. What are you doing with yourself now?
I work. So I've got a real estate business, Rock Solid Homes. I've been flipping houses for probably about 9 years, I suppose. About a year after I retired, I started flipping houses. I started off with my company Training Mask, which I sold to my business partner Casey Danford, and that company is doing phenomenal. And then that led me to real estate. I flipped houses about 9 years. I still am, but things are real slow right now with all the mortgage moratoriums, lack of foreclosures, stuff like that. So I do roofs now. I've been doing roofs for a little while now, and just trying to diversify myself as much as possible to different things.
When you talk about flipping the houses, I know you're a very handy man. I know when you were actively fighting, especially in the early part of your career, I know you were laying flooring and stuff. I'm assuming you're doing all the work yourself?
I do a very large majority of the work myself. So I'm on the job site every single day, and my hands are as dirty as everybody else's on the job. So it's multifaceted. So I'm subcontracting, I'm working, I'm doing tear outs, making phone calls, dealing with inspections. So there's a lot of different stuff that entails. And, you know, when I first started doing this 9 years ago, I knew nothing about real estate. I knew nothing about flipping houses. And I just kind of learned as I threw myself in the mix and learned from a lot of different people. So it's been really good. You know, it's something I can do until I'm 60, 70 years old, and I can relay all that information to my children too. And hopefully they'll do the same thing someday.
Sure, absolutely. So I want to talk to about, you know, you come in contact with realtors and, you know, construction workers and, you know, all kinds of people. How often do you get recognized, you know, for your fighting? You know, you know, I don't know how big the MMA world in you know, real estate, I don't know how much they mix over, but do people know, you know, one of the baddest dudes ever is the guy buying the house?
It's kind of funny because, you know, as time goes on, people tend to forget, and they tend to not recognize, especially if you've been out of the limelight for a while. I've been out of the limelight for 10 years. So when I first retired and I first started doing real estate, people recognized me everywhere I went. And the job sites, closings, you name it, viewings, people would always recognize me. But it's been 10 years, so, you know, it gets fewer and farther, you know, in between, but people still do. Yeah. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing, though. It can go both ways.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you enjoy being recognized, or do you like kind of like, you know, hiding out at the, you know, the auctions and stuff without getting recognized?
It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. You know, I appreciate the fact that people still recognize me, and I appreciate the fact that people were fans of mine when I competed. So it doesn't bother me one bit. I like talking to people, and it's a great way to kind of reminisce and just talk about the past. You know, it's kind of fun reliving those moments with people, with fans, even if you never knew who they were. You know, the fact that they watched you and they supported you, it's really nice to kind of connect with those people.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. When you walked away from the sport, you were coming off a win. Very few people can actually say that, but it wasn't just a win. It wasn't one of these, you know, guys retiring and, you know, he's out, you know, former star, but now he's in the regional scene and he beats, you know, a prospect. So like you beat Evan Dunham, who I believe was ranked at the time. You were very ranked at the time. You were right in the mix of a title shot. And I know it wasn't a perfect situation. I know injuries had a huge part of retiring, but how did you know it was time?
Well, my body told me it was time. You know, leading into that fight, I had a bulge disc in my neck, 2 torn shoulders, separated rib, 2 torn hips, 2 torn knees. And my body was saying, hey, dude, you know, you need to chill, you need to stop. And so I knew, and not only that, but, you know, when I fought that fight, I was sick. I don't know, not a lot of people knew that, but I had a 100-degree temperature when I stepped into the cage. So I was sick, and I was extremely injured, and I was 10 years older than the guy I was fighting. So I definitely had my back against the wall. And, you know, leading into that fight, I knew in the back of my head that was probably going to be the last fight. I didn't admit that to myself, because that's not something you want weighing on yourself when you're in the middle of a fighting a world-class fighter like Evan was. He was undefeated. I think he was 8 or 9 at that time. So no easy task by any means, but I knew it was time, and my body told me it was time. And I never wanted to be one of those guys who retired because I had to. And when I say that, what I mean is, you know, like Dana White, there's been several fighters over the years that were top notch for a long time. And Dana comes along and says, hey, you have to retire because you've lost 5 fights in a row.
Sure,
I didn't want, I wanted to retire on my own terms. My goal was to retire on a high note. You know, I worked really hard to get to where I was at in the mixed martial arts industry, and I wasn't willing to flush those accomplishments down the drain. So I wanted to retire on a high note on my terms, but I also wanted to make sure I had a backup plan. So I didn't want to retire and be like, okay, what now? So when I retired, I already had training mask in place, and that was my backup plan into retirement.
Yeah. So when I think about you, you know, you've have so many great moments, but you're like, your losses are in the UFC are only to the very best guys ever. I mean, I think Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn, and Frank Yeager. 3 of them are in the UFC Hall of Fame. One of them is definitely going to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. So my question is, obviously you want to retire on a high note, but do you ever get those like what ifs, like, man, I beat Evan Dunham when I retired. Like, could I have got, another match? Could I get another, shot at the title and won? Did that ever
Yeah,
happen?
that thought process definitely goes through my head, especially when I first retired. It was like I was still fresh. I was still in the mix. I was still world ranked. I was still in the UFC. I had multiple fights left on my contract. So I could have very easily continued fighting. But like I said, it got to a point where I was in pain 24 hours a day. I needed needed 6 surgeries when I stepped in the cage for my last fight.
Jeez.
So I was in a lot of pain. It just was to the point where it wasn't fun anymore. And when something becomes not enjoyable, it wasn't fun, it was painful, I made the right decision. But there are still those what ifs. What if I would have fought 2 or 3 more times? But,
Sure.
in the US, how far away are you from a title fight in reality? I mean, I might have had to fight for 2 more years to get another shot at that world title. You just never know.
Yeah.
And my goal was to win the world title twice, and I didn't accomplish that goal. But I feel like I still had a real good, successful career.
Yeah, of course. Now, how many of those injuries, does it still affect you today? Do you still have lagger
every day? Yeah, all the time. So I spend a lot of time rehabbing still. I still work out and I still stay in shape and I still eat healthy. That's just who I am. That'll never change. That's how I'll be till the day I die, because that's just who I am. But, I do a lot of rehab still, pretty much daily. I've got a hyperbaric chamber at home that I use on a regular basis, which is absolutely phenomenal. Infrared saunas. I do detox baths, all kinds of different stuff. Massage weekly, chiropractic once or twice a week. So I'm always trying to stay up on top of that stuff. And I've had a couple surgeries since I've retired. Both of my hips have been repaired. I still could use a few more surgeries, but I'll wait it out.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking. Yeah, pretty much every day, I mean, I competed for 25 years with wrestling and with mixed martial arts and competed at the highest level possible. There was a point in time I was training 4 times a day, 6 days a week when, in my younger years. But, that stuff all comes back to haunt you when you get older. You think that pain is temporary when you're young, but when you get older, that stuff comes back and then it sticks with you.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. So when I think of Sean Sherk, the first thing always jumps in my mind. I always think of that All Access with Rochelle Leah, where she followed you around, and you had, I still believe to this day, probably the hardest workout routine in history. And if anybody, I just watched it today just to make sure it was still out there. I can still find it on YouTube. It doesn't even seem real. Like someone could do that. Now, obviously that led you to the highest level, being obviously crazy conditioned. I mean, your nickname is the Muscle Shark for a reason. You had muscle on top of muscle, this and that. But would you have changed things differently? Do you think that training, as hard and as tense as you were, that led to a lot of the injuries?
Well, I know it did. It led to the injuries definitely, but it also led to those wins.
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to fight some of the best fighters in the world and beat them. And there were some fights I won some split decisions. I won some decisions that, people said it could have went either way. Like with Evan Dunham, there's people out there that think I lost that fight, and I think
Sure.
Evan's won it. So, yeah, he's one of them, and that's cool, But, you take those close wins like that, and you tell yourself, okay, well, if I didn't train the way I trained, would have I won that fight? So you kind of weigh out the pros and the cons. Okay,
Sure.
I'm dealing with injuries right now, yes, and I dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the course of my career, but I was able to win some world titles and beat some of the best fighters in the world in the process. So was it worth it? Yeah, I'd do it all over again. I wouldn't change a thing.
You wouldn't change anything. Yeah, no, once again, guys, check that out. It's absolutely. I remember, I actually started eating bison because you mentioned it on that show, and it's actually delicious. So by the way, get some bison burgers. They're delicious.
Baby food real popular when I did that all. Even to this day, when my kids are getting ready for competitions and they're cutting weight, baby food's a part of our diet.
Yeah.
I add all that old school stuff into what my kids are doing now.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, when you and I were talking, that's a lot of fun being able to pass that knowledge along.
Yeah. It's kind of like a full circle thing. It must be really nice. So you said you fought some of the best guys. You've had some great memories. Is there one, if you sit down with your family, and there's one where they say, Dad, tell me about what's that one moment that stands above all the rest? Is it just winning the title, or is it something else?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've had a lot of real memorable moments, and I've had these conversations with my kids and with a lot of people on many occasions. And you know, the most memorable moment for me was winning that world title. And I just had this conversation with some friends the other day. They were at my house, and they asked me to pull my belt out because they wanted to see it. They've never seen it before. So I pulled it out and I showed it to them, and then they wanted to hear some good insight. And I kind of gave them a backstory as far as the UFC belt goes. Um, so when I fought for the UFC belt, I believe I had 33 or 34 fights under my belt. I was ranked top 5 in the world for 5 years at that time. And I had many opportunities to fight for world titles in other events besides the UFC coming up through the career. But I always said, no, I don't want to fight for a world title. I had chances to fight for world titles in other countries and other events. And I always said, no, I don't want it. And people would ask me why. And I said, well, the only world title I want to fight for is a UFC world title. I said, I don't want to win another world title. I don't want to feel what it feels like to have a belt wrapped around my waist unless it says UFC on it. Wow. And that was, I turned down all these other world title fights because of that reason. And I showed him the picture of me when I was getting my hand raised, and you could see Dana White standing behind me, wrapping that belt around my waist. And I just was smiling. And even now, thinking about it, I get goosebumps, because I didn't know he was standing there. I didn't know the belt was about to be wrapped around my waist. And next thing you know, that I feel that belt wrapped around my waist, and just like 10 years of waiting to feel that feeling. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that was the second time you fought for the title. You fought against Matt Hughes, upper weight class at welterweight. And that was a competitive matchup. Like that wasn't, I mean, you lost, but it wasn't like a Washington. I think I remember you winning rounds. It was a close fight. So yeah, I understand. Like you've been so close to gonna get that moment, and your fight against it was Kenny Florian that you won the title, the vacant title. It was a bloody war of people. You know, a lot of new listeners to this one. Check that out. It's really entertaining, bloodbath fight. So as someone coming up, you said you've fought this guy, you fought a guy, you're waiting for this moment, but you fought everybody. Like I just mentioned, Matt Hughes, this and that. Is there one guy that you wish you had a chance to say, I want to fight? I would wish I would have had the chance to fight, insert whoever.
The fights I wish I could redo are the ones I lost.
Okay.
And, you know, going into these fights, I can pick, you know, what I believe I did wrong, you know, after the, obviously. So, I mean, I wish I could redo the BJ Penn fight over again. You know, for no other reason than I threw my game plan out the window probably a week before we fought each other. I let my emotions get involved, and I fought his fight rather than I fought my fight, which I believe was part of his game plan leading into it. He wanted to throw me off mentally, and he was talking so much stuff, and I let it get to me, and I just let my game plan go out the window, and I fought his fight rather than my fight. And I wish I could do that again. You know, not taking anything away from him, obviously, because he's one of the best ever.
Yeah,
you know, but
absolutely.
It's easy to look back on something and say, I wish I would have done it differently after the fact.
Yeah.
You know.
Now you're a guy. I know it's legendary. You don't really watch a lot of fighting. Like you don't really follow the sport now. Is that still the case?
I haven't watched a fight in probably 10 years.
So the reason why I want to ask you is, I mean, you don't live underneath a rock though. Like, you know who Conor McGregor is. You've talked about Khabib and this and that. One thing that stands out to me now, when the UFC had the lightweight division originally with Jens Pulver and Dean Thomas and Yves Edwards and Josh Thompson, these guys, eventually the division went away, and you were still fighting at welterweight at that point.
Right.
I want your perspective, because I asked Josh Thompson, we had him on the show a couple weeks ago, like, why didn't that division get over at the time? And now obviously you were fighting welterweight, but you were still in the UFC at that time. That would go on to be the division. You're the champion of the most prestigious division in UFC history, you know,
right.
with Conor, with Khabib, with all these guys. What was the issue back then? Like, why couldn't the UFC, like, what were they doing wrong?
I think it wasn't anything that the UFC was doing wrong. I think the sport was so grassroots at that point in time, there wasn't the following. And the UFC was only doing 4 shows a year. Back in my early, they were only doing 4 shows a year. They couldn't support a lightweight division. there wasn't enough events. There wasn't enough fans to sell out arenas on a regular basis like there is now. So they had to get rid of the division, not because there wasn't the competition as far as fighters go. There was plenty of competition. There just wasn't enough time in the year to squeeze that extra division in there. And so they got rid of it because of that reason. And then, they brought it back after the sport started to really blow up after the Ultimate Fighter season 1 is when things changed. And that's when they went from having, I believe it was 4 shows a year to like 10 to 12 shows a year, just in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And that's when I wasn't in the UFC. As I was actually retired at that point in time. I hadn't fought in a year. I had a hardwood flooring business. I hadn't even trained in a year. And I just called my manager and I said, hey, call the UFC and ask them if they're willing to re-sign me, because they're doing 10 to 12 shows a year now. They need fighters under contract.
Sure.
And they said, yeah, we want him back. They signed me to a 4-fight deal. And I quit my job the same day, and I started training because my first fight back was George St. Pierre, which was a tough back when I fought in a year. Here you go, George St. Pierre, and what do you do?
Yeah, maybe the best guy ever. Yeah, welcome back.
I got beat, and I was expecting to get cut again from the organization because that's how it was back in the old days. If you lose one fight, you're gone. Not the same now, obviously, but yeah. So I was expecting to get cut after that fight, and the UFC said they thought I did a great job, and then they re-signed me to another contract after that. So that was another momentous moment in my career.
When did you know it was time to move down to lightweight?
I got offered to fight. I was a small welterweight. I walked around 75 pounds. I'm 5'6".
Yeah.
The weights are coming down from 195 to 200 at that point in time. They're probably cutting more weight now.
Yeah. Kamaru Usman is looks like a heavyweight now.
The average size welterweight at that point in time was 200 pounds, and I weighed 175 soaking wet. So I was giving up, 15, 20, 25 pounds to every one of those guys. And I'd made it I was very vocal about the fact that if the UFC offers me a title fight, I will go down to 155. And I said it in an interview after I fought Nick Diaz, who, again, he's probably 6'2", 200. I fight this guy, and I said in the interview, if the UFC offers me a fight at 55 for a title, I'll go down. And then about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from my manager, Manny Akpan, and he says, yeah, I just got off the phone with the UFC, and they want to know, can you make 155? And I said, yes, I can make 155. And he says, okay, well, you got yourself a world title fight at 155. As long as you can make the weight. And I said, I can make the weight. So that's how that happened.
Yeah. Now, how hard was it for you to make weight? I mean, like you said, you walked around 175, but
I was lean.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You're the muscle shark. You know what I mean? Like you don't have an ounce of fat on you.
It was hard, but I grew up wrestling my whole life. I started wrestling when I was 7 years old, and I cut weight my whole life. Probably why I'm so short. I cut weight my whole life. So I knew all about diet. I knew all about meal preparation. I knew all about how to lose weight. I never cut 25 pounds before, but I'd cut 10, 12 pounds as a kid, which is a so the first thing I did, my dog's coming down to join me. First thing I did when they offered me a title fight at 155 was I did a trial cut. So before the real weigh-in even took place, I did a trial cut on my own at home over the course of a week to see if I can make 155. And the first time I did it, I didn't make weight. I got down to about 156 to 157. So I didn't make weight, and I was completely wiped out for 2 days after that. So that was the first time I did it. I didn't do it. And then I did another trial cut a month before the fight. And then I made weight the second time. And then when the weigh-ins came, then I made weight easily from there. So the key to doing a trial cut before the real weigh-in took place, just to make sure I could do it and to make sure that my body was acclimated to it, to make it easier and so I could recover faster. So that's what I did. Every time I fought at 155 after that, I did a trial cut 1 month before every fight, just on my own. I did a trial cut, made it down to weight, and then I did a fight day the following day with all my training partners when they would come in, and we'd train for an hour after that, just to try to simulate the real situation as much as possible.
How much of a difference is it? So when you cut weight, you said you cut, anywhere from 20 to 25 pounds, but when you weigh in, you have, over 24 hours to rehydrate. In wrestling, that's not the case. I mean, especially like, the high school, you cut 10, 12 pounds, for a tournament, you'll be wrestling an hour later. Like how much of a difference did that feel?
It's a huge difference because, again, my kids, they wrestle and they cut weight too. So the big difference is that, like you said, you cut weight and you have to weigh in and you're wrestling an hour later. So cutting weight to me is actually a disadvantage as a wrestler. If you got one guy who's cutting 10 pounds, and we've had this happen several times with my youngest, he's wrestling up a weight class. He went up a weight class because I'm feeding him 5 or 6 times a day. I'm putting 3 protein drinks in his body a day. He's 100% fueled, 100% charged, and he's wrestling these big kids. They're dropping 10 pounds. Yeah. They haven't eaten it. And he's going up a weight. He's got 3 meals in his belly the day of the weigh-ins, and it plays to our advantage, I believe, because usually right around the 3rd period, these kids they're out of gas.
Sure.
They got no tank, and then he just puts the hammer down on them.
Yeah.
And it's happened times this year. He's a 9th grader, and he's beating seniors right now. And it's happened many times this year where he just puts the hammer down in the 3rd period on these kids because they literally have nothing in the gas tank, and he's going 110 miles an hour still. When you're fighting, of course, I used to count the hours. Weigh-ins are at 3. I fight at 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on where I am on the card.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can add all those numbers together, and I can say, okay, I got 32 hours before I fight. From the time that I weigh in, I got 32 hours to recover. That's a whole different ballgame because now you can cut 25 pounds. And by the time I step into the cage and fight, I'm 175 pounds. I'm not a 155er anymore. I was 155 for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I bounce back up, and I'm 175 pounds by the time I fight. So that's the difference. And you have you're not 100% because you're still suffering the effects of the weight cut, but you're 85% at least, or maybe 90, depending on how well you were able to recover.
Yeah. I've heard fighters say, like, I weighed 170 for 10 seconds on Friday morning, and then, then I was back up again. How much did it matter too, that like who was in the weight class welterweight? And what I mean by this is you were smaller, but also the top guys in welterweight was, going back to that time, and I'm obviously going off my memory, I'm obviously be forgetting some people, but Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, I remember Frank Trigg, like they were all massive welterweights, but they were also wrestlers. So like you wouldn't, could have a wrestling advantage, but at least like it's close. It's going to be a battle. You're deep on a double. You're not running through them like you would this, like Kenny Florin, who doesn't have a wrestling background. Like how much did that factor into it?
I wasn't avoiding anybody.
I didn't mean it by like that.
So I just want to make that clear. But 55 is where I should have been. But at that time when I got offered a fight at 55, those guys were getting bigger. Those guys were getting bigger and bigger. I mean, Anthony Johnson, what was he coming down from? 220. Big guys that are cutting a lot of weight, and those guys were getting bigger. So I knew I belonged at 155. And the only reason why I fought, I think I had, I've got 43 fights total, and I think I had about 35 fights at welterweight. The reason why I fought that weight class is because there was no world title at 155. I wanted to win a UFC world title.
Sure.
So 170 option, and then when they brought the 55-pound division back, then I went down. But I wanted to win a UFC world title, and I had to do that at 170.
Yeah. Another thing we got to remember, there was around that same time for a long time period, there was no middleweight championship. Murilo Bustamante gave up the title. You had guys guys like a Robbie Lawler who fought a lot of times at middleweight, cutting down too. So you also had that happening too. So if you remember,
that goes back to what I said earlier. They only had 4 shows a year.
Yeah.
They couldn't do a lightweight. They couldn't do a middleweight. They had to really spread it out because they didn't have the amount of shows that they needed to support that many weight classes. How many weight classes do they have now? 12?
Counting the females, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 12. Yeah, 12 counting the females in the UFC. Yeah.
That was a wild guess, but
yeah, good call. Good. That's pretty good. Pretty good for someone who doesn't watch.
You're right. But you know, they support that now. They're doing shows every probably 2 weeks.
Every week, every single week.
Pay-per-view. I mean, they can support that. There's probably, you know, I don't even know, 500 fighters under contract, if not more.
Yeah.
But again, back to my early days, you know how many fights they had how many fighters they had under contract. When I signed my first contract with the UFC, was UFC 30. They had 15 guys under contract.
Yeah.
That was it. 15 fighters under contract. So if you wanted a UFC contract, you had to be one of the best in the world, top 10 or top 5, and you couldn't lose. Because as soon as you fight, you're gone. And that's what happened to me when I fought Matt Hughes. I was 22-0 when I fought him.
Yeah.
And I think 2 or 3 in the world. And I lost the decision to a guy who was considered unbeatable. And 2 weeks later, they called me and they cut me.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You know, who does that? 22 wins and loss and ranked 2 or 3 in the world. And now we don't need you. Bye. You know, I mean, that's how it was back in those days.
Yeah.
Now, something like that now. But it just was a real cutthroat industry. And again, going back to why I trained as hard as I did, I couldn't lose a fight. You know, if I lost the fight, I'd lose my ability to pay my bills. I'd lose my contracts, and I didn't have sponsors back then, but you know, so there was a lot riding on it back in those days, a lot more now, I think, anyway.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think about, like, there was even guys who had to fight outside the UFC just to stay busy. I mean, Pat Miletich, you know, around a little bit before that time, but he was a champion and he was taking fights outside the organization just to stay busy while he was a champion.
I did the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I think it was 8 weeks before I fought Matt Hughes for the world title. I took a fight outside the UFC. Yeah. I had to. I got a house payment. I have to pay my. They didn't have a lot of money, and there was no such thing as sponsorships or endorsement deals. There was no trading cards or video games. There was none of that stuff. So the only way you made money was to fight. And if they shelf you for 6 months, I was working a job too, but you know, if they shelf you for that long, you have to find ways to pay your bills outside of fighting.
Yeah. And if there was a sponsorship, it was, you know, like Barry's Meat Market, and he put a symbol on your thing and he paid you $25 to have this on your shirt.
Yeah. I got paid $1,000 in sponsorship to fight Hughes, you know, back in whatever year that was, 2003 or whatever. And that was a big deal. Like $1,000, you know, sweet.
So let's talk about when you retired. There was rumors. You mentioned you wanted to fight with Royce Gracie. He mentioned you. Like, how close was that from actually happening?
It wasn't close at all. It was something I was willing to do, but I don't know. I don't think I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but I wanted it to happen, and it just didn't happen, you know. So I don't really know why, I guess.
Sure, but I can't imagine that looking any different than Matt Hughes versus Royce Gracie.
That's how I viewed it.
Yeah.
Well, Royce is a tough guy, and he's very, very gamey, and he's got heart, you know, biggest heart in the industry.
Sure.
So I'm sure he would have showed up ready to go to war just like I would have.
Yeah. So now I know you don't watch fighting. Why not? Why don't, like, what don't you don't enjoy it, or just?
I do other stuff. I don't know, you know. I don't know. I just maybe I'm too maybe it's kind of I've used this explanation a few times. It's kind of like pouring salt in the wound, right? It just I watch it, and I still want to do it, you know.
Yeah.
But in my head, I think to myself, you know what? I think I can still do that. But it's just, I don't know. I just don't. I decided when I retired, I was just going to walk away from it and be done with it. Just focus on it.
I know you've coached and stuff. You know, you've trained guys, you coach. Like, any way we could see more of that, or is it completely just staying away?
No, probably not. No, I mean, I love training with my kids, and I like training at home and staying in shape and stuff like that. But I could never see myself opening up a gym or being a coach or anything like that. My real estate business keeps me real busy, and this roof stuff is going to keep me real busy. I've got other stuff I do as well. So my goal is just to run my business and just leave the past in the past.
All right. I got two more questions for you before you get out of here. And I already held you longer than I said it would. I appreciate the time. Let me ask you a question. So, you know, you're staying away from the sport for the most part, just because it doesn't seem like you have any ill will against it, but just it's chapter to your left that's been closed, but say somebody. What?
I say, yeah, just move on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I get that. But some young fighter knocks on your door, runs into you at the grocery store or something, and he wants, hey, it's Sean Sherk, it's former UFC champion, absolute legend of the sport. Give me some advice. What advice would you give a young fighter that you wish someone told you coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I used to say all the time that you get out of it what you put into it. So if you're all in with your heart and your mind, you're going to get a lot more out of it than if you're just half-hearted into it. So you just have to approach it. You have to love it because it's a lot of work. Not only is it a lot of work, but it takes a lot of time to succeed. And there's a lot of bumps on the road. There's a lot of ups and downs. You really have to love what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. No substitute for hard work. The harder you work, the more successful you will be. The more perseverance you have, the more successful you will be. And that's in long term, that's what it takes to be successful in this sport. Surround yourself with good people, good trainers, good training partners is key, and try to evolve. The sport is always evolving, so you have to evolve with the sport. There's a lot of factors in there, but it all just comes down to, it takes time and perseverance, and good things will come if you stick with it.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about more than just MMA there. You said learn to evolve, surround yourself with good people and hard work. I mean, I think that could be for any part of life.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. That was my philosophy when I fought, and that's my philosophy now. Yeah. That's business right now with those exact same thought processes.
So my last question for you. So I always think about like I talked about when I think about Sean Sherk, I just think the hardest worker probably still in history. But 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when people talk about Sean Sherk, what would you like them to say about you?
Hopefully they refer to me as a UFC Hall of Famer.
But I'm sure that's going to happen soon. I'm sure that's definitely going to happen soon.
I don't get any phone calls saying, hey, you're going to be inducted, but maybe someday it'll happen. I like the fact that people still think of me as one of the hardest workers in the sport. I felt like I had to be in order to experience the success that I wanted. So if people still talk about me 20 years from now and say I'm one of the hardest workers in the history of the sport, that would be a huge honor.
You know what? Maybe 10 years from now, instead of it might be UFC Hall of Famer, but it also might be Dad of UFC Champion. Like that might be your title.
That is true, because my youngest, he wants to win a UFC world title.
Yeah. And
stationed several times that he says we're going to be the first father-son UFC duo in history. So if that's true, that'll be pretty cool. Yeah. Maybe you'll see me in ringside cornering my son at some point.
There you go. And I think that'd be even better than being called UFC Hall of Famer.
I think so. Yeah.
Guys, you have it. I went way over time that I said, but listen, you guys know from the show, I do these interviews for myself. I just enjoy talking to the guys I grew up watching. He is Sean Sherk. Sean, thank you so much for the time. You're an absolute legend, and I'm sure that UFC Hall of Fame call is coming real soon.
Hope so. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Guys, stick around. We got Adrian Yanez, who fights this Saturday, which Sean Sherk will not be watching, but the rest of us will be.
Maybe I will.
All right, guys, we are in the second segment. This is where I talk to a fighter from the present. But before I get to him, I want to say thank you one more time to former UFC lightweight champion Sean Sherk. Now I talk to a guy that is, I'm hoping one day that I'm saying the same thing, calling him UFC champion. He is currently 1-0 in the UFC. He is Adrian Yanez. Adrian, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good, man. I'm just happy that fight week's here and I'm able to be able to get to perform on the biggest stage out there, man. Like I'm super excited. I'm super stoked, man. I get to go out there and fight again, living my dream.
Yeah, I forgot to mention in my intro that you're fighting this Saturday, UFC Vegas 22. You're taking on Gustavo Lopez. Before I talk about the matchup, because obviously we're going to have to talk about the matchup, I want to talk about your last two fights, the Contender Series and then your UFC debut. Incredible knockout, incredible performance in both fights. When you pictured your UFC debut or even pictured the Contender Series, could you picture it going any better than it did for those two fights?
Man, honestly, I felt like like in my Contender Series, I felt that I felt like I was gonna knock him out, but at the same time, I felt like I was gonna knock him out like first round, like end of the first, beginning of the second. I didn't expect it to go that quick. So whenever it went that quick, it kind of almost shocked me because I was like, oh, the opening's there, and I just let it rip. I knew that I had the shot, and as soon as I let it go, I even paused in the middle after that combination. I was like, oh man, it's happening, and then I blitzed in. And then in my UFC debut, man, I couldn't picture it going any better. It was just like a dream come true for me because I saw everything come in, and everything was just right. And it completely like it made me feel like, man, I'm up here. Like after I hit that head kick knockout, I was like, man, I'm in the UFC. This is so cool.
Yeah, so I talked to so many young prospects, and one of the things they say, like, you have confidence, you're fighting on the regional scene, you have confidence, you're building. You always say, like, yeah, I think I'm ready for the UFC, or I'm ready for the UFC. But then when you start getting those jitters, you start wondering. But you have had two, and I kind of count the Contender Series as a UFC debut because, there's so much down the line, and there's so much, there might even be more pressure on that than your debut. Do you ever sit back and be like, obviously I'm ready, like, that's kind of easy?
Oh yeah, man, yeah, like my Contender Series, there's a lot of pressure, man. There's a lot of pressure because like I felt way more pressure in my Contender Series than my actual UFC debut. Like my Contender Series, I go out there and you got to go out there and perform in front of the bosses. You got all three of them there. You have Dana White, Sean Shelby, and Nick Maynard all sitting there staring at you while you're about to fight. No crowd, no nothing. It's just you and the other guy in the cage, and there's literally like no music, no nothing. So you're just there, and like it's a little bit more nerve-wracking than the actual like UFC debut. But man, it was so satisfying, once you kind of get the approval of like, hey, you passed, you're good, you get to go on to the UFC, so that it was a bigger payoff for me in that sense. But the knockout, like the UC debut, man, like that one was me. I was relaxed. I walked in there and I was super relaxed. The pressure wasn't even on me. I felt super relaxed, and it felt really good. No UFC jitters. If I had any jitters, it was in the Contender Series.
Yeah, you mentioned UFC debut. You went against Victor Rodriguez. You ran right through him. I want to ask you this question, and please don't take this as an insult because I don't mean it. I mean as a compliment. So I do the Contender Series previews. I do the write-up. I do all the film study. I got to watch all the fighters. You were easy because you fought in LFA and stuff. You were very easy to find footage. But some people I got to find like shaky camera phones from someone in the crowd. Like some of the times are tough. So I had very high hopes for you. I wrote very high things. But you have taken it to another level since. Like, you've taken a step up in competition and look better than ever. What would you say? Like, what do you credit for that? Like, that you were a good prospect, but now you've got people like really buzzing. Like, what would you credit for such improvements?
Man, it's a mixture of a lot of things, man. It like me, two guys that I lost to in split decisions outside in the regional circuit are in the UFC right now, and the first guy I lost to is a really good prospect himself. So I've fought nothing but tough fights outside the organization. So it's like my losses, like, are like to legit like good fighters. Miles Johns, who got the knockout of the night.
Sure, yeah.
So like I fought him, and look what he's doing to those. Like look what he's doing to upcoming prospects. He's knocking them out.
Yeah.
Me and had a split decision. That could have went either way. He got the nod, but yeah, I just attribute it to like me just like constantly just training and always working on myself. And then after my last split decision, like I kind of had to change my mentality on it on fighting because I had to find joy like for myself at least, because at that time I was doing it for everybody else but me.
Yeah.
And then I switched it around. I was like, nah, I'm taking the fun out of this. I need to worry about me, not anybody else. And as soon as I did that switch, since like I found a new fire underneath me, and like I it got me here. Like I love training. I love going out there and performing and everything. So like my new mindset of just going out there and like getting better. And then now also a thing too is that like I always look at it like this: the judges are never my friends.
Yeah.
But I want to go out there and hurt who's ever in front of me, knock them out, and get a stoppage. Because every single time you go to the judges, man, like you never know. You absolutely never know. So I just want to go out there and finish fights. Make sure I get the guaranteed victory. Because it's it's nuts, man. Because you just never know. I hate it.
So the judges might be liking you right now because you're making that job pretty easy, at least your last couple fights. One thing I want to clarify, when I said like step up in competition, what I really should have said like platform. You have a bigger platform now because obviously, as you mentioned, guys like Miles Johns is obviously UFC caliber. He's fighting in the UFC. Let me ask you this: so, how much is confidence is an improvement? Like when you get these wins, like how much is that making? Like obviously, I've always believed that. You want to be extremely confident, almost cocky. Not where you're looking past somebody, but when you in any sport, when you have confidence, you feel like you're the best. How much is your confidence built based on the performances you've had?
Oh man, confidence is key to me, at least. Because I had to build my own confidence. I built my confidence off of me just fighting the tough guys outside. I come into the UFC. Like I fought a tough guy in Brady Long, and then fought Victor Rodriguez. But also especially looking at like not trying to downplay Victor, but he came out of Alaska.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
And everybody, like the Alaska MMA scene is not the best, but he had a good record. Last minute replacement. I don't give myself too much credit on that fight, but also I give myself credit on that fight because I did what I was supposed to do to him. Yeah. So if that makes sense, but yeah, like it I got like all the confidence in the world walking in because I like after like going from because I gradually built myself up and I got onto bigger platforms, because I was on Access TV, then I fought on UFC Fight Pass, and from UFC Fight Pass I go to the ESPN
Plus, yeah.
And now I'm fighting on the ESPN main card. So to me, like I'm just building confidence every single time because like they wouldn't have put me on the main card if they didn't believe in me. So it just gives me all the more confidence now that I'm fighting on ESPN on the main card. So to me, that's amazing. I just can't wait to go out there. Like I'm like, and also it gives that aura. Like you got that confidence about you, and like your opponent's gonna know because you're walking around, and it might not give them a slight edge. They actually might look at that and be like, "Damn, what does he know that I don't know?"
Yeah.
For me, man, it's everywhere, man. I got confidence about me. I'm walking in here fully confident that I'm gonna go in there and march across the cage and stop this guy.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unwrap there. You mentioned he came from Alaska. You're from the Houston area. I know you're fighting. That's an area right now that is just absolutely booming with like high quality fighters. It's kind of becoming a little bit of a hotbed right now. The amount of guys. I should actually just say Texas altogether. I know your team down in Houston, Fortis MMA up in Dallas is doing a lot of things. There's a couple other teams in there. So that's one. Obviously the LFA. I mean, we could talk about the LFA, how many people have gone on the Contender Series. So you kind of have that, and then now you're on the main card. I'm sure there's a lot of confidence. Now let's talk about the X Zone for a second. Let's talk about your opponent. Your opponent, he's coming off a win himself. Close matchup against Anthony Burchak, Gustavo Lopez. Like, how do you said you're going to go in there and stomp him. Like, what really jumps out to you that like gives you that reason? Like, I'm going to beat this guy because I'm better. Insert what?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm better in the stand-up. I feel like I'm the more skilled fighter. He's a little bit more of a brute, but that works to me. That works in my favor. He's gonna go in there. He's gonna try to throw a little bit of power and then try to shoot him for a blast double. And if he goes in there recklessly like how he did against Anthony Burchak, then I kind of feel like I'll get an early stoppage. Especially because he kind of fights with his. Well, I'm giving up too much.
Yeah. I don't want you to give away your game plan.
No, because I already know he's already said in a lot of interviews that has anybody seen his ground game? So he's I think he wants to try to take me to the ground, and wants to test me out there. And you know what? I don't mind it at all, because I just recently got my black belt, and if I submit him on ESPN, everybody's gonna be looking at me like, oh, this kid got it all. He can strike. He can submit you. He got jiu-jitsu. He can defend the wrestling. So that's legitimately what I'm trying to do is like I want everybody to be scared just to even fight me. So I'm trying to get to that point. And looking at the matchup between me and him, I definitely feel like the striking, like me in the striking department, definitely outdoes him 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah. All right, so let's ask you this. So you got these wins in the UFC. I always like to ask this question, like, how has your life changed? Like, people recognize you a little more? People that you haven't talked to since high school start messaging you. Hey, I see you on TV, stuff like this. Is that happening?
Yeah, man. A lot of that's been happening. A lot of people who I never talked to in high school are been like, oh, I remember you from high school and all that stuff. And I'm just like, dude, I've never talked to you.
Yeah.
He's like, all right. It's funny, but at the same time, like I'm just one of those guys. Like, man, I'm just one of those guys. Like, if you're gonna get on, like being a fan, I'm cool with it. I'm 100% cool with it. I don't mind it. I got a lot of people like coming out the woodworks to support me. And I still always keep true to the people who started with me, and like
that's right.
I still like a lot of these guys who were like fans of me back whenever I was like 5-1, 4-1.
Yeah.
Stuff. Like I still remember all those people. Like I know, like they jumped on the train early.
That's right.
So to me, I still remember those guys. So like anytime, like I make sure I followed them back like in the beginning, so now I can pinpoint who was
that's right.
there and who was there. So it's pretty cool to see like the growth and all that stuff. But yeah, like I've had some high school people try to hit me up and all that stuff. Yeah, no, like yeah.
You know what? As long as you get like that girl in high school that kind of blew you off, but now so she starts messaging you, then that one can be okay though. Yeah. I always think about I was thinking like a train that's going up the mountain. On your way up the climb, the further you go, it starts getting a little more crowded. But lose a fight, and suddenly as that train is going down, people start jumping off like crazy. They say like,
oh, yeah. Absolutely, man. So I take it with a grain of salt with those people, man. I take it with a grain of salt because like I love the sport and I love the supporters that I have now and everything because they seem like loyal supporters. I got a lot of people backing me and behind me. But at the same time, I know if they jump ship, then I'm just like, all right, cool. That's cool. I didn't want to anyways.
Yeah.
So either way, it's all good to me.
Yeah, you win the title. They'll be like, "Yo, that was my boy all the way." You lose the title, man. I knew that guy wasn't that good. Anyways, I always was saying he wasn't that good. That's how they be.
Oh yeah, it's so I don't mind it, man. I don't mind it at all. But any support is good support, and then you see the people jump off, and hey, like more power to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're starting to run out of time, but let me ask you this question. So, what's the plans? Like, you beat Lopez. Like, what's the plan? Are you have someone in mind, or you want a ranked opponent? Like, what's the plans?
Oh man, I start Gustavo Lopez. I want Nate Maness next, man. That guy, he called me out right after his fight. It was like a day before my birthday, and I had already signed the contract to fight Gustavo. My manager was like, messaged me saying we got called out, and I was like, and I went to go back to hear it, and I was like, all right, okay. He called me a slow burn. I was like, all right, cool. I want that fight. But then he told me, he's like, well, like we have Gustavo. You just signed that.
Sure,
that
yeah.
I was like, damn it.
Now, is there a backstory to that? Like, what's the beef?
No, it's not really. Like, honestly, like I was just sitting around. Like it was a day before my birthday, and my birthday's on a Sunday. So Saturday, I was just having a good time with the family, like eating and everything. And while he was fighting, I was not paying attention whatsoever. I was like actually cutting the cake, I think, at that time. And right after, I'm like, my phone starts blowing up, and I'm like, everybody's like, oh, like this guy called you out. You got called out. Twitter was like blowing me up, and then like I get messages, and like my manager messaged me. He's like, hey, we got called out. He's like, he don't want it. And I was like, well, what am I missing? So I go up and I had to rewind it, and I rewinded it. I was like, oh, he did call me out. That's pretty cool. And then he was like, then he said the slow burn part, and I was like, oh, he thinks I'm a stepping stone. Yeah, no. As soon as I heard that, my whole mentality was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, I got called out. This would be a great fight to like, oh, I'm about to you.
Yeah. Well, it should be looked at as a compliment, because if you didn't have any buzz in your name, they're probably not going to bother. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, yeah, I completely understand. He really didn't have to add that slow burn part, man. That slow burn part like kind of just stuck in my head. He was like, slow burn. I was like, man, because he was like, I think he also called out somebody else.
Honestly, I don't remember it, but
yeah, he called out somebody else, but he called me out. He was like, yeah, I'll fight him for a slow burn, thinking I'm a stepping stone. And then next thing you know, he called the other guy, and I sat back and I watched this fight, and I was like, all right, I see what he got, so I'm really excited that he called me out, because it'd be a fun fight for me.
Yeah.
For him, I don't know. For me, it'd be a great fight.
Yeah. So Nate Maness, be prepared to be called out on Saturday if Adrian wins. Last question for you. Obviously, I said if you win, you obviously extremely confident you're going to win. So tell us, how do you get it done?
Oh man, I knock him out, man. I want another
first
50K.
round. First round.
Yeah, first round, especially if he comes in like he usually does. Yeah, first round.
There you go. And if you get the 50K, what do you're gonna be smart with the money? Like, how are you gonna spend it?
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be smart. Only like about 10 grand is gonna be spent on food though.
So your next fight, so you're saying is you get the 50 grand, your next fight will have to be at featherweight.
Oh yeah, no, maybe lightweight.
Maybe like. There you guys have it. That is Adrian. Adrian, I want to wish you good luck in this fight and all future fights.
Okay, thank you so much, man. Thank you for your time.
Guys, stick around. We got one more segment. We're talking to Ben Ellis, who fights this weekend at Cage Warriors. He's undefeated. Excited to talk to him. Stick around. All right, guys, we are on to the final segment of this week's MMA Past, Present, and Future. Before I get into our future star, I want to say thank you once again to Adrian Yanez. Wish him good luck on this Saturday. We also have another fighter fighting this weekend. He is our future star. He's putting his perfect 3-0 record on the line at Cage Warriors 120 when he takes on Manny Akpan, all the way in. Are you in Wales right now?
In Wales, yeah.
He is in Wales. So all the way to the other side of the ocean. He is Ben Ellis. Ben, how you doing, my man?
Hi, mate. Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. So let's get right into it. So this past weekend, LFA. I don't know if you're familiar with LFA, but they're a regional program, a regional organization here in America, and they had a card called Undefeated, and they were basically trying to match up undefeated fighters. And the winner would really get some buzz. You're in that same situation. You're taking on a fellow fighter who's undefeated. Does that add anything to this matchup?
Yeah, I think so. It's always nice taking someone's O.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm definitely going to do that to him. It's going to be good fun. And obviously, it just sounds good, doesn't it? Someone's always got to go. Yeah. Shout out to Bass Rutten, who used to always say that.
Does that add any pressure to you that you're undefeated? Like, you were also, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were also undefeated as an amateur, correct?
Yeah. 8-0 undefeated amateur, 3-0 pro now, like you said. So, I'm used to it. I obviously, I never want to lose any fight, regardless of who it's for, where it is. So yeah, I just want to win, and then it just so happens then that always winning means being undefeated is a byproduct of that. So yeah.
Yeah, what I love about European fighters, and I'm sure you'd probably agree with this, especially European fighters from smaller countries, and I don't mean that in significance, I just mean it in pure size and numbers. Wales is a smaller country. When you make it to that big stage, you have incredible backing. Like, the whole country is rooting for you. Are you already feeling that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really lucky. Like, it's got so many people getting behind me. And like you say, I think it's just because of the fact that coming from a smaller country, there's not that many guys doing what we do. I mean, you saw when Jack Shaw, who's from Wales, made his UFC debut.
Yeah.
The amount of Welsh support he had there is awesome. Mason Jones, the same. And yeah, I'm the same when I fight in the UK, and I'm sure when it ends up going overseas, it'll be exactly the same there as well.
Yeah, I think about, like you mentioned Jack Shore. Like I did a write up for when I was talking about young prospect. I talked about Jack Shore, and like he's got a cult following over there. Like it's crazy, and I'm sure you probably do similar. So let's talk about your matchup. You're taking on, and I apologize if I'm saying this man's name wrong, Manny Akpan. I believe I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Well, how do you feel about the match? Like you said, both you guys are undefeated, but how do you feel, like, from the X's and O's sense, how do you feel about the matchup?
To be honest, I think I'll smoke him. I do. He's not bad. It's like, I don't say that too disrespectfully. He's a good boy. He's beat some good boys, especially in the amateurs. He got quite a few finishes, looking for like flying triangles, flying arm bars, elbows, etc. All the wild stuff. But I think if you do that type of stuff too much with the wrong type of guy, they'll just put you in knots, and that's what I'm going to do to him next week. Yeah,
you said he's a good boy, good competition. That's what you want at this stage. Like, you want to continue taking a step up, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's funny because every fighter says that, don't they? Everyone you speak to will say they want the tough fights. And then when you speak to promoters behind the scenes, and they'll tell you that guy does not want the tough fights, they see the true side of it. And then when I speak to the promoters around the UK, not so much now because I've signed exclusively to Cage Warriors now, but before then they were saying that I was only going to fight on their show if they brought in a certain caliber of opponent. So yeah, the fact that he's pretty decent, just makes it all the more worthwhile for me.
So let's talk about this. So, Cage Warriors has a huge following in the UK, but the hardcore fans, as we say, across the world follow it too. Like, obviously the most hardcore fans in America and Canada and Australia, wherever, they follow the Cage Warriors. So what are the hardcore fans going to be saying about you the day after this fight? Like, what's the narrative about you?
I think that I can do everything when it comes to fighting skills. It's a little bit annoying just because in the fight so far I've shown quite a lot of wrestling, a lot of ground and pound. So then people fixate on that.
Sure.
I definitely plan on throwing Manny around at some point just because that's something that I love to do when I fight, is to impose myself on someone. But like you say, the more I fight and the more people are able to give me resistance when I do fight them, the more skills people are going to see. And I think after this one, or maybe after the next one, they're just going to start to say, this guy can do everything, and it's going to take somebody really, really good, like not just to beat him, but just to give me a fight.
So let's talk about, you mentioned your wrestling. That's the first thing that I think of when I think of you. Your last fight, you put on a wrestling clinic. But what also stands out to me is when I think of wrestlers, and now please don't take this as an insult, and if you're from Wales, I'm not trying to insult the country by any means.
Nah, that's
but
cool.
When I think of wrestlers, I think of, Russia. I think of the Middle East. I think of something like, the NCAA wrestlers in America. I don't think of Wales. So why are you such a good wrestler? Like, where did this come from?
We got a secret weapon. I can't pronounce his surname, but his name's Arash, and he's from Iran. He's our wrestling coach. And yeah, the guys who are involved in MMA or wrestling in Wales just know he's an absolute beast.
Yeah.
He's been at the Matt Academy for a good few years now, and pretty much all of us can wrestle just because of him. Although in all fairness, I would say that our freestyle wrestling is terrible.
Yeah.
There's just a massive emphasis on MMA wrestling. That's the only thing we've ever really done. And it saves a lot of time in terms of getting good at MMA wrestling. Because even the really credentialed wrestlers from the States, like, even they admit that a massive amount of it goes out the window when it comes to MMA.
Absolutely. Yeah, I grew up wrestling. And you have to change it. I mean, especially a lot of the ground stuff you do with just is irrelevant in MMA. Another thing a lot of people don't understand, you mentioned your freestyle wrestling isn't that good. In America, like freestyle and Greco, which is, the international wrestling scene, the Olympic scene, that stuff, that's actually not what our wrestling season is. We do a completely different style called folk style, which I actually think is the most entertaining, but the rest of the world is they like the other two styles. You mentioned you can do everything, but obviously you want to make improvements. You want to make, there's always area improvement. The best fighter in the world, John Jones, Khabib Nurmagomedov, whoever you want to say the best is, they always have to make improvements. So before you take a step up to the next level, what would you say, I need to improve this? And it doesn't have to be like a big overall general, I need to improve my striking, I need to improve my jiu-jitsu. It could be something small, like I want to improve my leg locks, or I want to improve my jab, or just I need more experience. Like, what would you say you need?
So I'll give you the notes from the last fight, just because that's probably been where the emphasis was this camp.
Sure.
My last opponent avoided a lot of the ground and pound just by being safe.
Okay.
So he's not winning the fight. I don't really feel like he's trying that hard to win the fight. His only objective is for me not to knock him out on the floor, because for some reason I can hit really hard on the floor without a lot of space. I don't know why, but it's something that everybody comments on. So I feel like when people feel a little bit of ground and pound off me, they tuck up.
Okay.
And in the last fight, I was so determined just to find a way to hit him that any thought of advancing to a submission, advancing to the back, wasn't really there. If the thought occurred to me, I chucked it out the window straight away because I just wanted to hit him. That was a massive takeaway from that last one. And also just counter-winning combo on the feet. I'm very difficult to hit clean.
Okay.
Something that everybody I spar with comments on. Just a kind of weird movement and a good knowledge of distance that my grandfather gave me from a young age. Means that I'm good at not getting hit. And then sometimes, because I'm not being hit, I become complacent on the feet.
Okay.
And it's something that if I choose not to implement my wrestling at all, I want to be not just, marginally outpointing somebody on the feet, but really piecing them apart.
Yeah, I know. Sorry to interrupt you. I know one thing they say about if the saying is you have a good chin, that's never a good idea. That means you get hit a lot. It's always good to, when we see a young fighter coming up and we're doing the write-ups and doing the previews, they go, I don't know how his chin is because he didn't get hit that often. That's usually like a good sign.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier in the interview that you signed exclusively with Cage Warriors. What's the details to that? Like if you got offered a spot in the UFC or Contender Series, Ultimate Fighter, whether it was maybe a Bellator, can you sign elsewhere?
No, you can sign for the UFC, but nobody else. My contract's 5 fights, and this will be the second one of that. And yeah, like I say, it doesn't apply to the UFC. If the UFC come in, you can still go, but other than that, it's exclusive to Cage Warriors.
Does that count, like the Contender Series or the Ultimate Fighter or anything like that? Is that included?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. I'm not big into like reality TV, so I definitely wouldn't want to do the Ultimate Fighter. And then even Dana White's Contender Series, I'm a bit so.
Yeah.
Not a massive fan of it. So I never looked into it, but I don't know is the honest answer.
So you're breaking my heart right now because I don't know if you know this, but I am the exclusive Contender Series preview guy for Sherdog.com. So you're killing me, man.
Myself in the foot right there.
Yeah, you're killing me. That's my show.
I'll tell you my issues with it. It's not that I think it's a bad idea. To be honest, my issues are kind of with Dana on that because he's taken a few fighters. Like the main example I got is I think you pronounce it Brendan Loughnane.
Brendan Loughnane, yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he fought a really high-level guy on the Contender Series, and he beat him. And he took him down in the third to secure the win. And then Dana referenced that as in he didn't want to see that intention on a Contender Series. He wanted to see somebody swinging for the finish. And I was a bit like, nah, you don't get to make that call. Like, you've chucked him in the cage with a dangerous boy, and he's beat him. And now you've decided he's not getting signed because you wanted him to swing for your entertainment. And it's, nah.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's entertainment, but Brendan won the fight, and that guy's now in the UFC himself.
Yeah. I think. Brendan. What did he sign with? He signed with the PFL, I think. He's.
The guy that he beat.
The guy he beat is. Yeah. So the plan is. So the plan is the UFC. I'm assuming. How far away do you think you say I would be ready in 6 months, a year, right now? Like, what do you say?
Skill-wise, I think I could do it now.
Okay.
Without too many problems. Like I say, the MMA world is pretty small now, so I've sparred plenty of UFC caliber guys. It's not really an issue. It's just at the end of the day, MMA is a business in it, so I'll need to build my brand, probably win the cage. Well, no, probably about it. I'll win the Cage Warriors belt. Somewhere between 7-0 and 9-0.
Okay.
Then probably defend it once or twice, similar to what Jack Shaw did.
Sure.
And then you're in, and that's that.
So you're looking years from now, because I mean to get that many fights in by then, it's probably 2, maybe 3 years.
Not necessarily, because there's 4 trilogies happening for Cage Warriors this year.
Okay.
So at December I'll be 4-0.
Yeah, so there you go.
So then all of a sudden, then it starts to get a lot closer. So maybe, what are we now? March. So yeah, a couple of months till December. So maybe a year and a half.
Yeah. So year and a half, you could be there. Let's get it. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Let me ask one more question to you. So you're fighting this weekend. You got Manny Akpan. If I want to make some money, what's the bet? How do you win?
I'll stop him probably with ground and pound.
What round? First round. So there you go. If you want to make money, bet on Mr. Ellis to win by first round stoppage by TKO, ground and pound, and you'll be a very rich man. Ben, listen, thank you so much for the time. I wish we had more time. I know you're all the way on the other side of the world. So good luck to you. Good luck to you this weekend and everything going forward.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on too.
No problem. Guys, that's it. This is this week's episode of MMA Past, Present, Future. Of course, I want to thank our guest right now, Ben Ellis, one more time. Wish him luck. I want to thank Adrian Yanez, who's also fighting this week. Wish him luck. And, of course, I want to thank the time spent by former UFC lightweight champion Sean Sherk. And you've just listened to MMA Past, Present, and Future.